Geico presents Our Town, Season 4, a 30-minute podcast produced by Best Bark Communications, a small but fierce client-centered marketing company powered by decades of experience and well-established business networks. Geico, 15 minutes can save you 15% or more on car insurance. Now, here's your host, Andy Ockershausen.
This is Andy Ockershausen, and this is Our Town. Janice said to me one day, Andy, you're a has-been, but maybe you could get back into action by doing a podcast. And I said to her, what is a podcast? That was it, seriously, Steve. Yeah. 2 years ago, and she put me on the road to recovery. Janice,
so you want to introduce Steve so people know who you're talking to?
I'm sorry. But, Buckhantz needs no introduction. I thought everybody knew he was here. I told everybody.
If it were TV, they'd know, but radio has no pictures.
Steve Buckhantz is such a absolute icon, and that's a terrible to say for a man this young. But it was a time there was Glenn Brenner, and there was Gordon Peterson, and there were names everywhere. They're all gone now. Thank God we still have Buckhantz, and we have Buckhantz and the world champion, I hope, Wizard someday.
That's nice of you. That's nice of you, Andy. I go back in D.C. to 1984 is when I came back here, but I'm born and raised here, as you know.
Washington Lee High School.
Washington Lee High School, born at Columbia Hospital for Women, which is no longer.
So was I.
Yeah,
Columbia.
A lot of people were. It's incredible, isn't it?
Had one of my sons were born at Columbia.
Yep.
It was for women at one time. But
yeah, that's what they called it.
Into general.
And they tore that down after I was born, I think. Don't think they wanted to make the same
weather
mistake
department
twice.
Bought that building.
Yeah.
And tore it down and built a new one.
Yeah,
but
raised
Steve,
in Arlington and W&L High School, and a very famous high school, which they're getting ready to change the name of, but a very famous high school. They're not dropping it. They're getting rid of the whole Washington Lee, and I don't know what the new name will be. But at any rate, you had Warren Beatty and Shirley MacLaine.
Oh my God.
Grew up in Arlington, went to that high school. Sandra Bullock was 9 years after me.
Ken Hunter.
Ken Hunter, yes. Forrest Tucker from F Troop. Great sports athletes. Jake Scott, who was a Super Bowl MVP, went to W&L. Eric Sievers. John Leipold was a kicker. Reggie Harrison was a great running back.
God, Steve, you got them all.
John Hummer, who was a great basketball player here, and his brother Ed at Princeton, and John went on to play for the Buffalo Braves.
Well, I'm going to one-up you with a guy that you don't know, but his name was Myron Gerber. His father started drug fair.
Oh, really? How about that?
Gerber was Washington Lee. Great. He went to the Naval Academy.
Stanley
Jew
McChrystal.
Navy. He was the first one that.
I was going to say,
Myron Gerber. His father owned it.
Yeah. We had Stanley McChrystal, who was a general, in the last regime. Yeah, he was at W&L. In fact, same years as me. So, very famous high school in Arlington, along with Yorktown and Wakefield at the time. Yep.
As I told you, Steve, in my early days, it was George Washington and Alexander and Washington Lee in Arlington.
Yep.
A big football rivalry.
Sure.
On Thanksgiving Day.
The Old Oaken Bucket.
Oaken Bucket.
Yep.
And we even televised it. I hate to bring that up, Steve, but we televised it on Channel with Nat Albright.
Nat Albright. Nat Albright for Gillies.
Thank you very much.
I'll never. Oh, he was
Fantastic.
Great. He was great. He was great.
Steve, you got such a storied career because you did one of the smart things that people do, and I hope they do it now. You left town to get your nails. You left the town to become a broadcaster.
Right, which doesn't happen very often anymore. Back in the day, if you were going to get a job at Channel 5 or Channel 4 or 9 or 7, whatever it may be, you had to go to a small market first. You didn't just jump into it from college. That was unheard of. So we all had to go away first, and I got cut my teeth in Harrisonburg, Virginia, where I went to college at James Madison. Back then it was Madison College, and there was one TV station there, WHSV.
Yeah.
But even before I got on TV, I wasn't even thinking about TV. I actually went to the University of Miami for a semester.
Wow!
In 1973, Coral Gables. And was hoping to get into broadcasting there. I applied to 3 schools locally, Madison, AU, and Miami. I got accepted at all 3, which, again, would never happen in this day and age. And went to Miami because I think it was kind of, I was glorious and thought it would be really cool. But I had no chance to get on the air. There were 25,000 kids at the school, and I had no chance at the local radio station or the campus station. So after one semester, I transferred to Madison College. My high school football coach, the late Ellis Whistler at Washington Lee, was at Madison College coaching as an assistant coach, and I played football in high school, and I punted and place kicked.
Wow.
And was pretty good.
You didn't find that out, Janice. It's not in his notes
and
here.
Got off a 66-yarder once, which was my claim to fame. It took a good role.
And then after you left, they became a football power.
Well, yeah. No, you're right. They were a pretty good football team. And but anyway, Ellis at Madison helped me transfer from Miami to Madison. I was going to punt for the Madison football team. But when I got to Madison College, which at the time was 7,500 kids, now it's 22,000, I wanted to get involved in broadcasting, and I went to the first meeting of the radio station, and there were 8 people there. Unlike Miami, where there was
25.
There was probably 500 kids there, and so 8 people at the radio station, and I was the only one interested in sports, which was great. Because the following semester, I was the sports director at this 10-watt radio station, WMRA. You could yell farther than the signal. I'm serious. It was
on campus.
On campus, 10 watts. But that's where you learn to make your mistakes. I used to play records. I'd pick out the prettiest album cover and just play the record. But what I did was I came up to the Capitol Center. I got a press pass. There was a job opening at Madison for the color commentator for the basketball team. They wouldn't let a student do play-by-play. They had a professional do that. But the color commentator, and this is how I got my first job. I took a tape recorder, which I still have in my basement, a reel-to-reel tape recorder, big thing, brought it up to the Capitol Center, got a press pass, called up the PR guy, Mark Splaver, got a press pass, sat at the press table with this reel-to-reel recorder under the press table with a microphone in my face and did the play-by-play of a Bullets game. Took it back to Madison College to our sports information director, a guy named Rich Murray. Got the job doing the color on the Madison College basketball broadcast in 1974 and did that for 4 years. And that's how I learned and started to learn how to do play-by-play and started how to learn to do broadcasting in front of a microphone, doing games, live games. And I did women's games and men's games. And that's when I then made the transition into television in Harrisonburg in 1977 doing weekend
Steve
sports.
Buckhantz, you have gotten such a great background. I don't know how many people know these things. I had no idea. I knew you'd gone to James Madison, but I had no idea about you doing your broadcast. I had no idea you was fighting for it.
But you were right. That's how you had to do it. You had to come up through the ranks, and that was just
your dues.
That was the first of 5 TV jobs. I was in Harrisonburg doing the sports and the weather. I've got my pilot's license, so they let me do the weather at 11 because I knew something about meteorology. Not much. I'll tell you the truth. What I used to do, I had one of the very first VCRs. It wasn't even a VHS. It was made by Quasar. It was an old tape, and I had one of the very first ones. And I used to tape Gordon Barnes's weather on Channel 9, and I'm in Harrisonburg, but we had it on the cable. And I used to tape his weather forecast at 6, come home after the news, watch it, have a little map, and draw what he had on his map. Take it back to the TV station and basically reproduce that for the weather at 11 in Harrisonburg. I figured it's close enough to D.C. Nobody's going to know the difference. Besides, there's only 8 people watching anyway.
They couldn't afford a weather wire, obviously.
No, they didn't. So I did the sports and the weather, but that was my first job. And then from Harrisonburg, I went to Chattanooga, Tennessee. So I went from Harrisonburg was 196th market out of about 210 in the country. Went to Chattanooga, which was the 71st, did the sports there, was there a year and a half, went to Nashville after that, which was a great market,
state
capital,
upgrade.
Big upgrade. They had a beautiful minor league baseball team there, the Nashville Sounds.
And then they got the Predators, right?
Well,
later.
but much later.
Okay.
They had no pro sports when I was in Nashville. They had Vanderbilt and Tennessee State and some stock car racing,
Then
that was
who
it.
moved there? Houston.
But much later. I was way after I was gone. This was in 1980. So I did the sports there in Nashville, did weekend sports, and then went to Atlanta from there to the best station in the whole South, WSB-TV. Powerhouse. Worked in Atlanta, worked with some great people. Ernie Johnson, who does TNT games, is one of my closest friends. We worked together at WSB. And I was there for 3.5 years doing weekend sports with a guy named John Buren, who was up in Baltimore forever, a very close friend of mine. And then came to Washington in 1984. So Channel 5 was my 5th station.
But they were all upgrades.
You climb the ladder.
Yeah, they were not lateral moves.
You climb the ladder.
Right.
And
SB is a powerhouse.
Huge station, huge. And back then, that's what you had to do to get back to Washington.
Right.
You didn't go to work for a year in Paducah, Kentucky, and come to D.C. You had to make the move from Paducah to the next market, to the next market, to the next market. That's one of the ways this business has changed. I mean, we had some interns at Channel 5 who actually became talent on the air. Now, they're good. I mean, there's they're good. Jackie Benson's over at Channel 4, and she's very, very good. But that's pretty much how she started as a newsroom
great street reporter
person. Yeah. And that's probably the best way you can get yourself into some of these stations is to intern at them.
I'm sure you get a lot of young people because of your prominence. Steve Buckhantz is the most prominent sports guy in Washington. And I know that, and we all know it, Steve. But you worked it. You worked your way up to that. So many young people come in and talk to us or talk to Janice or say, we want to get into broadcasting. And I say to them, there's no easy route.
Right.
Get out of town.
Right.
Go to any place that'll give you a job.
Exactly. That's correct. Absolutely correct. The good news, the bad news for young people trying to get into the business is it's more competitive now than it ever has been. Everybody wants in. The good news, the great news is there are thousands of jobs in this business.
600 TV.
Thousands of jobs. Not just TV, but look at social media, everything. When we came up in the business, there were if you wanted to get into TV, to be a news anchor or a sportscaster, what we did, there were 2 jobs at each TV station, and that's it. There was no ESPN. There was no Fox Sports. There was no CNN. CNN just got started in 1978. There was none of that. There was 2 jobs at each TV station in each market. In Washington, there happened to be 4 stations, but in most markets, there were 3. ABC, NBC, CBS. 2 jobs, the weekday sports guy and the weekend sports guy. That was it. There weren't any more. So when you sent your resume out, you sent it to a TV station hoping to get one of those 2 jobs, and you probably weren't going to get the weekday job because that was like a veteran guy who had been there forever.
Absolutely.
You were probably hopefully going to get the weekend job. And again, there were no cell phones. There was no internet. You got to remember this. The staple.
I
grew up in it.
Nothing.
The staple in the business was Broadcasting Magazine, printed on DeSale Street. That was it. That was the God publication in the business. So when you went to get a job in broadcasting, you looked in the back of Broadcasting Magazine. That's it, right, Ken? That was it.
Situations.
I mean, you had no other way to get a job unless somebody maybe saw you on the air, but your station wasn't going anywhere past the market. So you looked in the back of Broadcasting, which is how I got my job from in Chattanooga. I'm in Harrisonburg, and me and my buddy who did the news, I did the sports, we open up the back of Broadcasting Magazine.
There it is.
They're looking for news, weather, and sports, and it says it sells a Sunbelt station. So we're thinking it's Florida, we call up it's Chattanooga, Tennessee, but we sent a team resume. We said if you're looking for news, weather, and sports, you need to hire us because we've done this together, and they did. They hired us both. They hired him to do news, me to do sports. But that's how you got your job, was Broadcasting Magazine. There was no other way. I can't tell you how many 3/4-inch tapes I sent out and never got back. In fact, you were at the point where the huge 3/4-inch tape, you were ecstatic if you got a rejection letter back. Some communication from the news director was, we're thrilled just to say we don't have any place for you, because most of my tapes were gone and I never heard from anybody. But when I did and I got those jobs, you were pretty excited.
Well, you did something very special to me and obviously to you. And we're going to take a break here, Steve, and come back and talk about it because you spent some time in my favorite, radio. This is Andy Ockershouse, and this is a podcast, which is radio without a transmitter.
Technology Truths, brought to you by Geico.
Technology Truths.
Truth. You have 14 login passwords, and you can't remember any of them.
Doug 1. Doug 2. Doug is awesome. Doug is awesome 1, 2, 3.
Truth. It's so easy to switch and save on car insurance at geico.com.
Doug is super cool, ampersand underscore exclamation point 1985. Knew it.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
This is Sonny Jurgensen. Got a confession to make. I let my wife drag me to one of those Mike Collins estate planning seminars. Like I don't have enough on my plate with a certain football team. Actually, it wasn't too bad. In fact, we both learned a whole lot about how to protect our kids and grandkids down the road and to take care of ourselves right now. So if you get one of Mike's invitations in the mail, go. I'm glad I did. Get all the information and register online at MikeCollins.com. That's MikeCollins.com.
You're listening to Our Town.
This is Andy Ockershouse, and this is Our Town, and we've had a very, very fine discussion, which we listened to, Steve, of your career, which has been outstanding. And then you end up in Washington, D.C., your hometown, even though you were born in Arlington. This is our town and your town.
Yep.
This led you to get involved with local television.
Yes.
On the air.
Yep.
Before you became the play-by-play guy, you were a sports reporter,
yes,
correct?
Sports anchor at Channel 5. So I came from Atlanta in 84 to Channel 5.
Market.
Big market. Washington was bigger, obviously.
Right.
And back then, Channel 5 was not a Fox station. Fox Television didn't exist in 1984. It was called Metromedia, as you know. It was owned by a man named John Kluge, who was one of the richest men in the country, lived in Charlottesville.
Who was a food broker, too. Did you know
I did not know that.
Kluge Finkelstein was their brokerage company.
Wow. He owned our station.
I think he owned Charlottesville, too.
He probably did. I mean, he was huge rich. Metromedia was a big TV broadcasting, paging, all those things based up in Secaucus.
Billboards.
Yeah, everything.
They did everything.
Yep. So he was huge, very rich, and owned 6 of the biggest TV stations in the country: Channel 5 in Washington, New York, San Francisco, L.A., big
Chicago.
major markets. And so my first day at Channel 5, I was hired by a woman named Betty Endicott, who's a legend in this business. Very well respected. Obviously, she's passed on, but she very well respected and just a great lady.
A bright news director.
Absolutely, and just knew people and just was fabulous. She hired me, and my first day walking into Channel 5, I walk in, and Maury Povich was our news anchor. And then so I see him, and I say to him, "Oh, I've been watching you since I was a kid." Of course, he didn't like that, you know. But I let him know how old he was, which at the time wasn't very old. This is 1984. And then the next room was Brian Williams and Mary Norton and some other reporters locally. So I'm there with all these people, and I'm fairly young, but I got the job to do weekends. The weekday guy was Bernie Smilovitz, who had interned for Glenn Brenner at Channel 9. So Bernie was a weekday guy, and I was a weekend guy. And
wasn't Chick your substitute on the weekend?
He was our weekend guy, but that came later because we brought him up from Augusta, Georgia. In the meantime, I had some other weekend people. I was the weekend guy first, and then I became elevated to the weekday guy in 1988. They brought in a guy named Joe Fowler for 1 year, who, if you watch infomercials, you see him. He does like the suck and seal and whatever that's called. And, I mean, he wears the plaid shirts. I mean, he's very, very good at these infomercials.
I bet he's a rich man.
He probably is. And he did sports for 1 year, but he looked a lot like Joe Theismann. And at the time, that wasn't exactly a positive, I
know what you're saying.
Joe, back then, it wasn't nothing against Joe. I love Joe. He's a good friend, and he's great at what he does. But back then, people looked at that, and it was a strike against Joe Fowler. Plus, he was a kind of I won't say a caricature of a sportscaster, but he's an actor, and he was portraying a sportscaster. And in this market with George Michael and Glenn Brenner, you can't come on like gangbusters. You have to create a niche for yourself and move in.
Work.
You can't just come in and try to take over.
Well,
and
don't forget,
that didn't
he
work.
wasn't Billy and he wasn't Sonny.
Yeah.
That hurt him.
So he left after a year, and that's when they gave me the job. So I had that sports director job for about almost 10 years. And and worked with some great people. But that's when I started to hone some of my play-by-play skills doing Georgetown basketball.
Career.
Right, separate stuff. Radio at WWDC, DC 101. Hired by a guy named Goff Labar, who was the GM. His son's here. Yeah. Goff was the general manager for the Greaseman, for Howard Stern.
Oh, yeah.
If you've seen the Private Parts movie with Howard Stern, the guy in the movie that portrays Goff is named Griff in the movie, but that's Goff Labar. And so he hired, obviously, Grease and Howard and all those.
Very good broadcaster,
yeah.
I'd say that.
And he gave me that opportunity to do sports in the morning with not only Paul Harris, who was the DJ at the time, but Eddie Gallagher on the AM side. And Eddie was a legend and just the nicest man in the world. What a great broadcaster and a great guy.
Eddie
and
Eddie's not going. There is Ed Walker.
Oh, all those guys were, phenomenal and legendary. Willard Scott, obviously, and all those guys.
Willard's still
the
alive,
Joy Boys,
but he's in good shape.
Yeah, Willard's alive.
But Steve, how did you get? Well, one of the things you did for my station and did for WMAL, you did Navy football, and that to me was big time. I used to
that
tell,
was great.
We had Maryland for years, but
yeah.
we lost Maryland. But Navy football was so important. I said, half of the United States Navy lives in the greater Washington area.
That's a good point. And plus the games are broadcast all over the world and everything like that. That was one of the highlights of my career. If I could go back and do that again, I would. I mean, doing Navy football was fabulous. First of all, I was there. I got to work with people like Jack Cloud. Steve Belichick was there when I was there.
Yeah,
he was, this is
sure.
Bill Belichick's father.
Dad.
They were all there, and so I worked.
Well, John worked. Feinstein did some color.
Eventually, John came on to do color with me, and that was fabulous because he knows everything there is to know about the military academy. So it was just like listening to a
Civil War.
A Civil War, great book. But doing the Navy games was so awesome because these kids, first of all, they're all rocket scientists, okay? They're all, these aren't your average kids. These guys, they do football as a sidelight there. They go to school. And I traveled with the team, and I would sit on the team plane and hear the tutors behind me tutoring these kids as we'd fly to the Air Force Academy or whatever. And I learned more in doing Navy football than I did at 4 years at Madison College, I can tell you that. I know all about the Thevenin and Norton theory of relativity. I can tell you that I learned on a plane. But doing Army-Navy games, Andy, was just such a highlight. I mean, the emotion and the passion that these kids have. They beat the crap out of each other for 3 hours, and then they stand next to each other and sing fight songs, and then they go to battle with each other for the country.
And at the end, no matter what happens, they're together.
They're together. So, those games are so emotional, and I was fortunate to do, I want to say, 7 of them. And Army-Navy, there's nothing like an Army-Navy game. There's the whole military. I used to love to go to Annapolis for a weekend for the game. They'd put me up in a hotel Friday night, go to a great dinner in Annapolis, broadcast the game on Saturday, come back, and then do Channel 5 on Sunday. But it was a great thing, and then I traveled with the team to all these great Navy places that they played football.
And as you pointed out, it was worldwide broadcast at the time.
Yeah.
There was no other worldwide thing like the Navy.
You had
fleet was listening.
Soldiers listening all over the world.
Isn't that great?
It was good stuff.
Well, Steve, you really made an impression, and I know you did it. You did some things for Channel 50 when I was there. Before that with WMAL. But now I want to talk to you about your career in later life.
Yeah.
You were always old. You were old when you got the Wizards.
It seems like it.
But Steve Buckhantz is the voice of the Washington Wizards. Used to be the Washington Bullets, for those of you that don't know. And we're going to come back. We're going to take a break now, boss, and finish up our long conversation with Steve about his career with the Wizards.
Hi, Tony Sybil here to tell you about Tony and Joe's and Nick's Riverside Grill at Washington Harbor in Georgetown. Spectacular new restaurants. We've spent a lot of time rebuilding. You'll love it. It's really fantastic. For any information, you can go online to TonyandJoes.com. It'll be a wonderful experience for the whole family. Call 202-944-4545 to make reservations. Everything is fabulous. You've got to come down and have some wonderful food.
Hi, I'm Charles Mann. For athletes like me, playing every down in a pro game is like getting in a car accident. After years of playing football in Washington, my body is broken. I've had countless surgeries and joint replacements. I've been looking for a non-surgical treatment since I ended my career. I heard a radio ad for a seminar about alternative treatment. It's called regenerative medicine, which stimulates your own body to heal and repair itself. No surgery, no more pain. That got my attention. I went to the seminar to learn firsthand all about it. Now you too can benefit and receive this treatment. This is the same procedure that pro athletes use to quickly and effectively recover from injury. If you're looking to eliminate your pain and arthritis, or if you thought surgery was your only option, take the first step like I did. Call 410-787-7250. Register for the next seminar and learn more about this breakthrough procedure. Seating is limited. Register now by calling 410-787-7250 and start living life again.
You're listening to Our Town with Andy Ockershausen. Brought to you by Best Bark Communications.
This is Andy Ockershausen, and this is Our Town for the local legend. I say he's an icon, but he's not. He's too young. And he's a very, very, very accomplished communicator, which I think, Steve, one of the things you do, and I compliment you, you sell the game. You've been doing the Wizards for a long time. Did you ever do the Bullets?
They were the Bullets when I started in '97.
And now but you sell the game.
Yeah, I mean, you have to,
even though
Andy.
It's a TV screen, you're selling the game.
Yeah, well, you know this business better than anybody in this market, and I appreciate the opportunities you've given me. And it's just been great knowing you because you're an old school guy. We go back so far, and I can't believe that I've been in this market that long, since '84. But you've been doing this seemingly your whole life. So it is, one door opens another, and the door to do the Bullets and then Wizards opened because of Channel 5. So I did the sports there at Channel 5, weekday sports, for almost 14 years, and did a lot of Georgetown basketball, which was on Channel 5, Big East basketball, and other stuff, Maryland games and what have you, and the Navy football and all that stuff, to the point where when Mel Proctor, who left Washington to go do San Diego Padres baseball, he was doing the Bullets, and he was also doing the Orioles. Great broadcaster.
On Comcast Sportsnet.
Well, it was HDS.
Right.
Home
what
team,
a
home
wonderful
team sports.
name.
Yep. Home
and
team sports.
It.
Yeah. And he was one of the best broadcasters I've ever seen. I think back to guys like him and Tony Roberts and Frank Herzog, and obviously Jim Carvelis was,
great guy,
greatest guy I've ever seen or heard. All of those guys. Mel left, and that with about 20 games to go in the Bullets season in '96. And Susan O'Malley, who was the president of the Bullets at the time, working for Abe Poland, asked me and Dave Johnson to finish out the season. And at the time, the people at Channel 5 were gracious enough to let me do that. And then I went to Susan at the end of that stint and said, look, I know you're going to be looking for a play-by-play guy next year. I'd like to do the games. And she said to me, well, that's fine, except you can't come to me in November during the biggest rating month of the year in TV. You can't come to me in November and say, well, I can't do some of the games because Channel 5 won't let me, and also in May. And I said, well, and fortunately I did not have a contract at the time at Channel 5. I was working without one, which enabled me to have this conversation with her. And she said, and I said, if I have to leave Channel 5 to do the Bullets, I will, because I can tell you this, Andy. If you asked 100 sportscasters what they really love to do, 99 of them will tell you play-by-play. It's the best. Not only is it the best job you can have in this business, but now it's the most secure job you can have in this business. Guys are dropping like flies.
Well, we all notice
and it's sickening, and it's tragic, and it's unfortunate, and I have very, very close friends that don't have jobs now or that are looking for jobs that are very talented people that should be working, but because of the way...
in the 60s and 70s, it's not easy to find a job for guys.
You're right. And so...
Youth.
So the play-by-play, I mean, people say to me, do you miss... I had lunch last week, just a few days ago, with Dexter Manley, he was another one of our guys, and just a fabulous guy. I love him to death. And he said to me, do you miss being a sportscaster on the news? And I said, no, I don't. I did it for 20 years, which was great. But my passion, like a lot of guys, is to be able to do play-by-play. And I've said this before. I think I've got the best job in Washington. Now, you probably get an argument from Joe Beninati at this point, who does the Capitals. But he's my colleague. He's my counterpart. And we have what I think is the best job. It's a local play-by-play job for a local NBA/NHL team, where you travel with the team, you stay in the team hotels, you travel on the team plane.
You're part of the organization.
You make a nice living. You work for 6 months, and then you're off. And it's a fabulous thing. Now, look, I don't take anything for granted.
Well, you can do other things.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But that's what I'm doing now, and this is my 22nd year coming up, which is hard to believe. And we have what I think is the greatest job, because it's secure to the point where if you create a niche for yourself and people like you, you can do it for a long time. Now, having said that, I lost my partner a year ago, Phil Chenier.
Because of management. Not because of anything about him.
No.
Somebody in management.
Somebody in management wanted to replace him, which they did. And obviously Kara Lawson is fabulous, who I work with now. She's very talented, knows the game. Right. A local person, went to West Springfield High School. So, but Phil was very good and still very good at what he does, and he did that for 33 years.
Tell me about it.
Hard to believe. After
I
playing,
couldn't believe it when I heard
it's
that.
unbelievable.
That was as bad as hearing that Chick Hernandez got fired.
Right,
I couldn't believe what they do.
And very close friends. So it's a tough business.
But Steve, you do it so well.
Yeah, well, thank you, Andy. I mean, you're
nice. Part of the team.
But
you
listen,
live with them 24/7.
Somebody could come along, in a few months and say you're done. And if that's the case, I did it for 22 years. So I mean, that's all you can do, Andy. You just do the best. You do the best you can do until somebody comes.
You're going to have a winner before you
changes it. Well, we've been to the playoffs.
Beninati sweated it out. He finally
got one, man. He got a championship. That was so fabulous. It was incredible.
Great for you and for everybody.
Yeah.
And great for our town, and that's why the Wizards eventually are going to do it. Steve, do you know back before there was a Wizards that Channel 5 broadcasted Bullets?
Yeah, I remember watching, Andy, when I was little.
Baltimore Bullets.
I would take my chair and put it up to 3 feet from the TV so that I could watch the Bullets. The game was, it came on, and the guys, I'm losing my thought here, who did the
old dude, Steve.
Who did worse, Steve, as you get older. Did the pregame, and it was Carling Black Label was the sponsor. They called it the TV beer, and anyway, they did the games, and they were on Channel 5 and Channel 20. And I watched them all, and I mean, but back then, I loved the business, and long before I ever got in it, I knew who every news anchor was in Washington, who every sports anchor was. I grew up watching Warner Wolf, who started everything you see today in television. He and probably Vince Bagley are responsible for everything in some way, shape, or form. Everything that you see on ESPN, Chris Berman is a Warner Wolf clone, okay?
I think you're right.
He grew up watching Warner when Warner went up to New York after he left Washington before he came back here the second time. Warner started it all, the bang, boom, stop it, get out of here, boo, boo of
the week.
That's Warner Wolf, and he started that, and everything you see guys do now is because of Warner Wolf. He deserves credit for all of that. So that's who I got to
deserve credit for staying so long.
Well, that is tough to do.
Can you believe sitting here that Michael Jordan played for this team?
Yeah, in 2000.
Hard to believe that.
Well, that'll be an asterisk on his legacy.
but for the city, what a great time!
It was incredible.
That was.
It was unbelievable. And he made a lot of money for Mr. Poland too, millions of dollars, because nobody watched.
Everywhere,
they saw everywhere we went, Andy. They came out to see Michael Jordan. And it was like if you saw Michael Jordan, like we'd walk through the bowels of Madison Square Garden, where just the workers were. It was like you saw the Beatles. People flipped out when they saw Michael. They flipped out, and it was unbelievable. We were in Nashville once. We used to stay at the Peabody Hotel. Memphis, and we used to stay at the Peabody Hotel. And they have a tradition at this hotel. I'm sure you've heard about it. They have these ducks that are world famous, and they bring the ducks down from the roof every day, and they have a procession that takes them to this pond. The ducks have been to the White House and everywhere else. They're very, very, very famous. And we are staying at the Peabody Hotel, and the people from the Peabody came to Michael Jordan, and they said, you know what would be unbelievable? If you got off of that elevator with these ducks and led the procession to the pond, how incredible would that be? And the Jordan's handlers at the time looked at the GM, and they said, let me ask you a question. He said, do you like your ducks? And he said, yeah. He said, because if Michael Jordan gets off that elevator, you're going to have a lot of dead ducks. He says, people are going to trample those ducks to get to Michael Jordan like you can't believe. So Jimmy Carter was staying at the hotel, and they had Jimmy Carter lead the ducks to the procession. In the meantime, when we all left to go to the game, I've never seen so many people in any city lined up to see this guy. They were in the hotel, out the street, up the block to the bus. Hundreds of people lined up to get a glimpse of Michael Jordan. So it was an amazing time to have him in Washington, to have him play for the team. He played for 2 years. We only won 34 games each year. And then he lost his job. Talk about an icon getting fired. He lost his job.
Time.
It was not good. It was not good PR, but it turned out to be the right move because he wasn't a good manager.
No, and he proved that when he managed in his own team. He couldn't do it.
Well, right, but he owns his own team, and they're not a bad team, so he's learning, and he's got good people around him.
That's it.
But that was an amazing time. Covering the Redskins, I was blessed to cover the Redskins in the glory years, Andy.
And you had one of the scoops of all time.
It was a good one. It was when Joe Gibbs retired the first time, and nobody knew about it. I mean, it caught everybody off guard. And I was in the right place at the right time. I was in a bar in Fairfax, Virginia at Champions after the news, so it was midnight. And I happened to be talking to some friends. One of them was a guy named Jim Spiros, who's well-known in this area.
Golden Greek.
Stretch Williams, Edward Bennett Williams' son, and a bunch of guys that know the Redskins. And Andy said to me, Jimmy said to me, hey, listen, I heard something last night that I'm stunned by. He said, I heard Joe Gibbs was going to retire. And I said, what? I just came from the TV station. I just did the news. I haven't heard anything. He said, well, we have some very close friends, and they said Joe is not feeling well and he's going to retire. Well, when you hear something like that, you got to check it out.
Oh, boy.
Now, unlike today, when you can blurt out anything you want on any podcast or any TV show, and you don't have to have sources and there are no repercussions, back then you had to have sources and there were repercussions if you weren't right. So I went home. And I fought about it all night long. I stayed up. I couldn't go to sleep. I thought somebody else was going to beat me to the story. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, I called the one source that I knew was reliable. And for years, I didn't reveal the source because we had an agreement. But the statute of limitations and liberty is up on that. And it was Charlie Casserly, who I had a relationship with. He was the general manager of the team. So under Jack Kent Cooke, he was the next guy. And Charlie came in and did a show with us at Channel 5, so we had a really good relationship. And I phoned him at 6 o'clock in the morning, the next morning. I actually got his wife, who said, Charlie isn't here. I said, what? She said, he's out swimming. He used to swim in the morning that early. And I said, okay. She said, call back in about a half hour. So at 6:40, I called him back, and I said, Charlie, I heard something last night that stunned me. I heard that Joe was going to retire. And he said, well, what did you hear? I said, well, I heard he wasn't feeling well and he was going to retire. There was a pause of about 5 seconds, and then he said to me, go with the story. When he said that, my heart started to race, Andy. I can't tell you. I was sitting in my bed in my underwear on the phone and nearly soiled myself. And he said, go with the story. And I said, okay. He said, here's what you can say. He said, you can say that Joe is going to retire because of health issues, none of which are life-threatening, and Richie Pettibone will take over immediately as head coach. And I was floored. I was floored because the news was shocking and because I knew that I was going to break this story and turn this city upside down, which it did.
Oh, my God, didn't it?
I went on the air. First, I went on the Fox Morning News with Brian Wilson, who was our anchor. And he asked me, and I said, we've got Channel 5 Sports has learned that Joe Gibbs is going to retire as head coach of the Redskins, and for all those reasons. And then my phone started to ring off the hook. It was ESPN 980. It was DC 101, who I was working for. It was all of these stations. A station in Chicago got wind of it. They called. Channel 5 said to me, get out to Redskin Park, finish up the Fox Morning News out there. They had to call Joe Gibbs back from Richmond. He was on his way to Richmond to do a speaking engagement, and the cat was out of the bag. And he came back, and that afternoon at 2 o'clock, they held a press conference at Redskin Park, and they made the announcement. Joe wasn't all that happy with me because I broke it and kind of it was before it was supposed to come out, but it did, and it was a fabulous day for us, for all of us, because it was just so filled with adrenaline.
Oh my God!
I mean, we were there from 9 o'clock in the morning to midnight, doing TV shows, the news, our special. And when the day was done, it was a great feeling of adrenaline.
We used to call that wall to wall.
Yeah.
That was one story all day.
And that's how news was. That's
Absolutely.
how news was made. That's how you did it. And you had sources, and you had interviews, and you had people, and it was fabulous. And it was one of the great days of my career. But I got lucky. I heard about it in a bar, and then I researched it. You know.
But the bar happened to be the place. You weren't in the bar for any particular reason. You was just there.
Yeah, I was having a beer and looking for girls. I mean, that's what you did back then.
Nice Arlington boy. Steve, I can't tell you how much pleasure this has been for me. You bring back so many.
Well, you are a pioneer, Andy. I mean, if anybody, first of all, in the business in Washington, D.C. knows your name. And if they don't know your name, they haven't been in the business long enough. So you did it all. You were GM at all these stations, these great TV stations, and you know as much about the business, if not more, than anybody I know. So I appreciate everything you've done for me, my friend.
Well, let me tell you, what you have done for our town and for what you've done for I'll say this, for the Bullets and for the Wizards. It's just been a fabulous thing what you've done, and your reporting is instrumental in. And you cheer people up, Steve. As I said, you sell the games. It's more than just describing it. You sell the games.
You know, I'm doing it in my hometown for the team I grew up rooting for. My parents used to take me to the Baltimore Civic Center to see Earl Monroe and Gus Johnson and Kevin Lockery and Wes Unseld and Jack Marin. And that's where I developed my love and my passion for this team. So for me to be able to do...
Buddy Jeanette?
That's a little further back. But Gene Shue, absolutely. Don Ole, Waxy Don Ole, all these guys... And then Phil Chenier became my idol and all of that stuff. And to be able to work with him after, watching him, I can't tell you what a blessing.
33 years.
What a blessing. I worked with him for 20, yeah. And to be able to call those games in the town where you grew up at the highest level, an NBA team, I'm blessed by that. I'm thankful to Abe Pollin and Susan O'Malley. I'm thankful to Ted Leonsis and Zach and the people that keep me on with the Wizards and all of the people at Home Team Sports, Jody Shapiro and all of those.
You're on because the audience likes you. Well, not only like you, they love you. Well, those people aren't stupid. They got a good product. They got a good play-by-play man that everybody loves. And I mean that, Steve.
Well, it's nice of you, Andy. I appreciate it.
So you're one of us. And you're such a big part of our town. I thank you so much.
Thank you.
We tried to do this last year, but we're in our 4th season now. Janice won't let me up. She's already planning the 5th season.
And my mother, God bless her, who will be 90 on September 17th. I told her I was going to be on a podcast. She said, well, I'll put on the radio. I said, Mom, it doesn't work like that now. We're going to have to get your iPad out and figure out how to find this podcast. But she'll be listening. And obviously I love her to death, and my new wife of 7 years, Shelley.
Shelley we love.
And, just my family, all my nieces and nephews and my sisters were all here.
Tell them all how to get it. It's so easy now.
I have to.
It's a lot easier than radio because if you get it, you get it on your phone, you can get it in the car, you can get it at home. But, Steve, thank you so much
Thank
again.
you, Andy.
I will be on the street with you when you win the championship. I promise.
I know you will. Janice, thank you very much for having me. Andy,
we
thank
love
you,
Steve.
It's great.
This has been Our Town with Andy Ockershausen and Steve Buckhantz.
You've been listening to Our Town Season 4, presented by Geico, our hometown favorite, with your host, Andy Ockershausen. New Our Town episodes are released each Tuesday and Thursday. Drop us a line with your comments or suggestions. See us on Facebook or visit our website at OurTownDC.com. Our special thanks to Ken Hunter, our technical director, and WMAL Radio in Washington, D.C. And thanks to Geico. 15 minutes can save you 15% or more on car insurance.